We have to be able to connect with the energy of those passions and fantasies, whether they're the girl next door vibes, the goddess vibes, or those like nasty vibes, right? There's all kinds of ways to show up as a sexual being in the world, and some of them are less fitting with the good mother and the good father stereotype. Welcome to the Sex After Kids podcast, a place for parents to come and learn together about the sometimes bumpy road back into the saddle of their sex life after adoption, childbirth, or joining a blended family. I am your host, Sofia Ashley, certified sex educator and sex coach, mother and stepmother, and your totally TMI guide to becoming BFFs with your body and initiating easy, connected, and confident, naked, sexy fun times. Here we are, one part science of sex, one part mindfulness magic, and one part straight up real talk to help you find the spark in your relationship and yourself after kids. I am so glad you are here. Welcome back to the Sex After Kids podcast, my friends. Today, I want to talk about the invisible expectations that you are trying to live up to as the good mother, quote unquote, and the good father, and how these stereotypes, these archetypes are messing with your sex life after kids. This got sparked for me as I caught a radio on a show called Day 6 on CBC in Canada about a new book that's coming out. And it's called The Good Mother Myth: Unlearning Your Bad Ideas About How to Be a Good Mom by Nancy Reddy. I'm not sure if it's out yet or coming out soon. I highly recommend you catch it. I will be too. And it got me thinking about all the ways that the myth or the idea of the good mother, and yes, even the myth of the good father, creates these skills, mindsets, and habits and expectations within us that are absolutely antithetical or like the exact opposite of what we need for a good sex life. And really, in many ways, for most of us, for the kind of life that we are craving. So, in this episode, we're going to break that down a little bit and hopefully give you some food for thought, some food for conversation in your relationship about these pieces and where we can tease away at them and pull them apart. This episode really ties back to the brick wall series I did. Just a little reminder for you, or a catch up if you didn't hear it. But back in episodes, I think through 2 through 4, I talked about how we all have this brick wall between us and the sex life that we are craving. And the brick wall is made up of all of these little bricks, which are thoughts, beliefs, and experiences about sex, about ourselves, about our partners, and our relationship that hold us back from the sex, the connection, the relationship that we want to have. And so the good mother, the good father archetypes build bricks into that wall that we need to dismantle in order to get to the relationship that we want post kids. And it's one of those unique dimensions that's different than the good woman or the good man. So let's get into it. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about what the good mother is and the good father, right? So, the good mother, the good father, these are social constructs built by many influences, and they're also a bit of an ever evolving target. So, for the good mother, it's an expectation of what a good mother is and what a good mother is not. So, a good mother is typically white, married, and heterosexual. And if you are not any of these things, well, then are you a good mother? Question mark. A good mother is selfless, nurturing, kind, always calm, endlessly patient. A good mother is always available. A good mother mothers naturally and by instinct. A good mother is committed to kind of controlling and optimizing the learning opportunities and environment for her children. That's like top of mind for her or them. A good mother anticipates everyone's needs before they're even articulated. You're the superwoman, you're 10 steps ahead of everybody so that everything is seamless all the time. And a good mother is needless, desireless, or her needs and desires come after everyone else's are met. A good mother is quiet, obedient, organized, like I said, 10 steps ahead of everyone and totally happy to be at the service of everyone else all the time. Good mothers are good, meaning pure, prim, and proper. A good mother is definitely not loud, wild, angry, passionate, and she is definitely not her own person with her own wishes and her own dreams and her own desires. Now, what's interesting in this is we can see the influences of white supremacy, we can see the influences of capitalism, and we can see the influences of patriarchy in here. If we look at the influences of white supremacy, for those of you who are maybe not familiar with that, what that means is like, how does racism play into this, right? And when we look at stereotypes of, let's say, like Black women as being like loud and wild and colorful, or whatever it is that we want to, whatever box that we want to put them in because of the color of their skin, we can see how just because of the color of their skin, they don't fall into this box of the good mother. Single mothers would not fit into this box of the good mother. Queer mothers would not fit into this box of the good mother. So we can see the patriarchy judging gender and gender identity and relationship structure. And what that just means is that those things are all tied together. They're all very alive in our culture, and they affect all of us, and they affect those of us who identify as white and privileged and cis less than those who are racialized, disabled, neurodivergent, different income levels, that kind of thing. But we all are impacted by them. It's a box that we either fit neatly into and are constrained by, or it's a box that we don't fit into and therefore we get discriminated against or experience limitations because we don't fit into that box. So either way, the box hurts and harms, right? On the other side of the coin, if we're sticking with the gender binary for a moment, because again, under patriarchy, this is where we go with. Um, So on the flip side of the coin, if we're looking at the good father, sticking with the gender binary because that's the societal construct that we live in. And of course, anything outside of the gender binary doesn't exist according to the patriarchy. Then the good father is a selfless provider, giving up his needs to make sure that his family has all of that they need, right? A good father is a protector. He keeps his family safe. He's good with his hands. He's physically strong. A good father is stoic, keeping his emotions to himself and not burdening his partner or his children with his emotions. A good father is in charge. He is in charge of his wife and his children. He keeps them orderly. He keeps them respectable with good manners, and he's judged for their failures. He is the head of the household and wears the brunt of that. And a good father is knowledgeable. He's good at many different things. He's good at repairing things. He's good with cars. He's good with mechanics, right? Like all that kind of stuff. And a good father in the stereotype, right? So none of this should be real, but in the stereotype, a good father is not emotional unless he's angry. He's not nurturing, not present, not playful, not creative, not silly, not curious, not willing to fail. And this is a really stark example of how the patriarchy and that myth of what it means to be a good father harms our men or male identifying folk who are not accepting of the emotional, playful, curious, receiving parts of themselves, who have a hard time accepting if they have a female partner who is a provider because they so deeply identify with that as their role and like almost their identity. Like, who are they if they don't do that, right? So this is an example of how patriarchy hurts men and patriarchy hurts men's parenting, right? It is not true that men are inherently not good at parenting. Men are wonderful parents. We have not allowed them to lean into their nurturing capacities. And I think of that even when I look at my son, who's 2 years old and loves his little baby stuffies and carries them around and nurtures them and feeds them. And he's so soft and he's so emotional. And I even have to catch myself sometimes. Um, Shying away from that part of him and like really remember to lean into encouraging him to keep that part of himself alive, as well as the part of himself who loves trucks and bows and arrows and only tolerates the color navy blue and all of those stereotypically, quote unquote, penis owner things, right? These constructs come from films, they come from famous baby and parenting books and Christianity, right? They've left their influence on the world. They come from the church and the Bible, which underscores a lot of Western society's thinking, even for folks who are secular or for folks who did not grow up religious, right? Can you feel any part of these images, these ideas of the good father or the good mother resonating? Either as something that you are actively trying to step away from or something that you find yourself striving for, maybe without realizing it. I, for example, noticed ages ago how much Instagram was influencing my mothering. I was constantly frustrated that my house didn't look like a magazine, but guess what? People don't live in fucking magazines. The DIY after photos don't show the houses with people's stuff put back in, right? And at the same time, the gram has totally healed my mothering in a lot of ways when I see lovely mom influencers who share their home looking staged and who share their home the way it looks like real, with their tables and entryways perpetually full of stuff and their roving piles of laundry that just move around the house without ever quite fully being put away. And that's just a small example of standards that I have taken in, and then they affect my mood, they affect my stress levels, they affect my parenting because I'm striving for this perfectly clean house instead of accepting the fact that that pile of shit at my entryway is constantly going to be there. It doesn't matter how many times I clear it. There's never going to be a day where someone doesn't ditch a bunch of stuff on the floor as soon as they walk into my home, right? Another example, I finally have the time and space to rebuild a garden in our new home this coming summer. I dismantled the ones at our old house years ago, and I can already feel myself agonizing because I wanted to look pretty. I wanted to make food, but I wanted to look nice too. I want to create a vibe and an environment like secret garden vibes in my backyard. But I've never been great with plants, and even my previous garden was pretty basic bitch as it gets. Root veggies, my friends, and some lettuce. So I can feel how this inner desire for perfection, for like Martha stewarding, is gnawing at me and it's having me question my plans. And it's literally holding me back from just making a plan, implementing it, learning from it, and allowing the damn garden to evolve and grow over time as my skills grow and evolve over time. So we can get frozen in aiming for perfection, in aiming for these invisible standards, which means we get numbed out, we get disconnected, we get distant from the things that we desire because we aren't feeling life, we're performing life, we're playing a role and seeing how perfectly we can play that part. As you're hearing this, can you hear the invisible standards that you and your partner are potentially reaching for? What a juicy topic to have a conversation about. I sincerely hope that you both listen to this together and maybe just make a list of like, what does it mean to you to me be a good father or a good mother? And make a list of characteristics and then look at that list of characteristics and ask yourself like, do I actually believe these to be true? Is this a complete picture or is there something missing from this? And are there actually things in this list that negatively impact the way I want to show up in my mothering, in my fathering, in my parenting, in my existence, I guess, right? So, how does this all relate back to our sexuality and to our relationship in bed? Well, if you've been listening for a while now, you can probably already see some of the ways that these stereotypes conflict with good times in the bedroom, but let's break it down a little bit, right? If our end goal is great sex with our partners after kids, sex that fuels us and fills us, sex that we can abandon ourselves to and get lost in, sex that feels connected, curious, playful, and delicious, then we have got a whole lot of bricks in that brick wall from these stereotypes. And let's start to pull some of those apart, right? Downright delicious sex requires a couple of abilities. It requires an ability to embrace our shadow sides and selves, to recognize and unleash a bit of that wildness within us. We're not going to have that like wild, passionate sex we are craving if we can't embrace the wild, passionate part of ourselves. And the good mother and the good father are not, right? They're waspy, good, prim, and proper people. We need to get messy, vulnerable, raw, and open if we want juicy, yummy, delicious sex, right? We need to know our bodies. In particular, we need to know our vaginas. We need to know our senses, and we need to live sensually. So much of this you can even hear would be like when we burned the witches, we burned people who had knowledge of vaginas and reproduction and the cycles. We burned people who had knowledge of the environment and the wilds and the plant medicines. We burned people who were um, open and connected to themselves and raw and vulnerable and able to surrender. And we burned people for, being too tied to their senses. Like there can be a Western judgment sometimes, I think, of like South American cultures or other cultures that are very touchy. They live sensually, they live very out loud, boisterous laughter, all of these kinds of things end up getting judged under that like white colonial patriarchal lens, right? We stifle that. And again, we try to shut that down in other people because it's shut down in ourselves, because that's the inheritance of us as white colonizers, right? In order to have yummy, juicy, delicious sex, we need to recognize and trust our desires and allow ourselves our desires. Capitalism don't want your desires, man. They want you to be good little worker bees. We have to be able to tune into passion. We have to be able to tune into fantasy, right? We have to be able to connect with the energy of those passions and fantasies, whether they're the girl next door vibes, the goddess vibes, or those like nasty vibes, right? There's all kinds of ways to show up as a sexual being in the world, and some of them are less fitting with the good mother and the good father stereotype. We need to be able to communicate and advocate for what we want and listen deeply without judgment to our partners and honor both partners equally. We need to give, but only within the limits of what we are willing to give, with an open and a full heart. And we need to be able to receive fully and indulgently without guilt when there's been a wonderfully consensual exchange. We need to be fully present, relaxed, and connected with ourselves and with our partner at the end of the day. And the good mother and the good father are very outwardly focused instead of inwardly focused, right? Can you see the contradiction with these characteristics and the good mother and the good father? You can't be 10 steps ahead of your partner's needs in bed and 10 steps ahead of what everyone else needs tomorrow while being totally present in your body to the pleasure that is happening for you right now in this moment. You can't know what your body wants and needs if you aren't allowed the desire to just fucking nap uninterrupted today. If your needs and priorities don't matter, you will have trouble unleashing in the bedroom if it's hard to close your eyes and give yourself to a 2-minute song or a 2-minute dance party in the kitchen. It is nearly impossible to fully receive, to be present to what you are receiving, and to not shame yourself for that receiving when you feel that it is your job to give all the time or to provide all the time. And this one is true both for the good mother and the good father. It shows up slightly differently, But that the something that I really like to highlight for dads is in my coaching, what I've seen for people who identify as men or penis owners is, I mean, for as much as we can all be poor lovers in bed, poor givers, they're really not great receivers either. Like receivers who can take in on a level that pleasure that will bring them to that next dimension, that next place, right? So we're all here having basic as shit sex because purity culture and all these influences have us out of our bodies, into our heads, go, 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 give, 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 do, do, do. It's hard to relax into receiving, to lose yourself to the fullness of pleasure as a father or a dad or a penis owner when you have a deep need to protect, to keep everyone safe, to be vigilant and on. And it's hard to own your pleasure as a woman or a vagina owner when we aren't supposed to have any pleasure. We aren't supposed to experience it. When sex is supposed to be either for the creation of babies or for the pleasure of the male partners that we're with. When we are subservient to the so-called master of the house, right? And I'm not saying in this episode that all of these things are true for all of us, right? Every single one of us is going to internalize different aspects of these stereotypes in different ways, depending on the kind of house you grew up in, depending on the kind of culture you grew up in, depending on the color of your skin, depending on the kinds of experiences that you've had. Some of us are going to feel this more deeply than others, and some of us are going to have internalized these things more strongly than others. And some of us are going to have partners who have challenged these things, and some of us are going to have partners who have not. Um, and I guess the other piece there is like what level of the other piece here is sort of like how deeply buried and how deeply influential these things can be. So sometimes you might hear something like this and go like, well, I'm not subservient to my partner. Like we're equal. And he's woke and like all those things. But then deep, 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 deep down, there's a level of internalized misogyny that shows up in both of you where those beliefs show up without your meaning to at all. And a perfect example of that would be that I am guilty as charged on this, and I have seen it with myself and numerous partners. Is on the one hand, I will vocally say, I want you to be more emotional. I want you to show your emotions with me. I need you to be more vulnerable. And then it's everything, it takes everything in me not to judge the shit out of a man sharing their emotions with me because of that stereotype. It's like confusing for me to see a man be emotional and to own his emotions and to share his emotions in a healthy way with me. And so my body and my brain are like, what is this does not compute, even though intellectually I know that this is what I'm looking for and what I want. So that's a small example of how the more evolved version of what we want contradicts what our body has deeply, deeply, deeply internalized. And it can create conflict for us when we're in a transition between those things and when we're pulling them apart. It's really hard to own our no's and our maybes when we feel deep down like we are our partner's property, or like they own our body, or like um, we made an agreement in our wedding vows to like share our body, those kinds of things. And it's hard to release fully when you are not allowed the luxury of emotion, either happy or sad. When stoic, controlled, professional, and held together is your default mode, like losing yourself in the rapture of pleasure is challenging. It's not a habit for your body. And it's hard to have the humility to learn to be good at sex when you are expected to be a five-star sex god out of the womb with no education about sex, about relationships, about vulnerability, about trauma, about all of the things, right? It's hard to have great sex life. It's hard to have a great sex life when you stop thinking of yourself as a sexual being, as a being with sexual urges, wants, and needs, because heaven forbid the kids should see you touch each other. Heaven forbid the kids should see you dressed like you're seeking that kind of attention from your partner. Heaven forbid your children see that part of you. And I don't mean that they see you naked and having sex, it's that they see your passion, your eros, your desires, that they see you dressed in different ways, whether it's for a night out dancing or knitting on the couch, right? It's hard to fuel your passion and your desire in the bedroom when you are a cardboard cutout of a human being in real life with no interests beyond toileting and meal times. And that one really hits home for me because when I was postpartum with my daughter, my first, I remember so clearly. I was exclusively breastfeeding, so I was getting like 2 hour little breaks. And I would sneak out on Thursday nights for a few hours and go to Starbucks and like binge watch some digital course I was taking. And I remember sitting in traffic. It was like minus 20. There's music on the radio, and I'm just sobbing because I'm like, I'm more interesting than shit and boobs and breastfeeding. Like, I'm a smart person. I'm an interesting person. I'm a person who's more than this. And yet, this is still all I talk about and all I think about, right? And still to this day, I often have nights off where I don't know what the fuck to do with myself other than work or work out or do chores. Like, where are my interests? Where are my passions? Who am I outside of my mothering, outside of my work, outside of my relationship? And papas, parents who are listening, right? I invite you to think about what moments you have had where you felt like parenting was taking everything of you or even from you. For parents listening who maybe had premature babies or complications during delivery or who have neurospicy kids or they themselves are neurospicy, I see you because it's even more challenging for you. The demands for you are more real, less invisible, less socially constructed, right? Like you have the good mother pressures, the good father pressures on top of the extra demands of medical complications or neurospiciness and all of that stuff, right? And none of this is to say that there are not seasons where more or less is required of us, right? The first 3 years is normal to be undone by your parenting journey. You're in a rite of passage, which means letting go of the person you were and building a whole new person, okay? It's okay to be in the messy middle. That is not the same as drowning in these stereotypes of the good mother and the good father. But these images do, like, they're really strong and they can be strong in that period of the messy middle, and we can reach for them when we're in the messy middle as like an answer, like a raft. Um, and we've got to like allow ourselves to just be in that cocoon state, right? To rebuild ourselves, to decide how we're going to show up in our mothering and to find again who we are as a parent and as a person in the world. And I think that the first 3 years is a big part of that. But I also think that there's a huge tipping point that I'm on the precipice of, which is as your kids enter teenagehood and they need less of you or they need you in different ways. There's a whole new level of insecurity and like time to fill, and your parenting role changes, so your identity as a parent shifts. um and I think when you empty nest, like another level of that happens. And when and if your children get married and separate from you even more, there's another level of that that happens. So, like we talk about on this podcast all the time, there are seasons where you are evolving, where your partner's evolving, and your relationship is evolving. And when that's happening, you want to be aware of these cultural influences that are deciding for you how you're going to show up. And what I'm here to invite you to think about is how are those cultural influences influencing how you show up as a person and influencing how you show up as a sexual person and a sexual being, and influencing how you show up in your relationship. And are those influences things that are helping you or are they hindering you? Are they helping you to land in relaxed, rapturous pleasure and presence with a person you love? Or are they keeping you emotionally disconnected and distant? Because if you're not getting the result you want, We got to show up differently to this. We got to think about who our sexual identity is and who our identity is outside of parenting and what our relationship identity is. Who are we as a couple? And who are you and who am I? And how do we dance together? Deep stuff today, but this book was just so interesting. It was too juicy not to riff on. So, this episode is here to challenge you on what you're reaching for, to help you define for yourself what you want, who you want to be, and the kind of relationship you want to be in, and to know, like really deeply, truly know that you can create it. It is yours to have. The skills that you need to make your bedroom come alive are the same skills that you need to feel more full and passionate and alive in all of your life. Sex skills are just social skills. They're just in a different space. And so if you are willing to be real with yourself, if you are willing to wed your passions and desires, if you are willing to actively create the life and the sex life that you want to have through this transition to parenthood, then you will find it. Before we wrap up today, I would love to hear, my friends, in the comments, in my inbox, in the DMs, what skill of the ones that we've talked about today would you like to nurture in 2025 towards a deliciously alive sex life? Would it be knowing yourself and your body? Would it be knowing your yes, your maybe, your no's, and being able to share those with more confidence? Would it be the ability to relax into receiving pleasure of all kinds, whether it's a juicy afternoon nap or an amazing oat milk latte or an orgasm more fully? Would it be tuning into your passion and your fantasy? Would it be living more sensually, like embodying pleasure through your senses, or really being able to practice being relaxed and present in all moments of your life? Or might it be prioritizing yourself and your needs? I'm so curious to see and hear where you are all at and what is resonating for you. Let me know in the comments, on the blog, and IG, and I will catch you next time. Loves. This is the part where we do the end bit, right? My friends, let's take a mindfulness minute here. Take a deep breath in. Open that mouth and let out a big, deep, full body sigh. Voila. Your nervous system thanks you. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope that your head and your heart have something new to consider, something new to talk about, and something new to try. No husbands were harmed in the making of this podcast, and a big thank you to my husband for his help and original music composition. Love you, babe. This podcast was recorded on the traditional territories of the Kwanlin First Nation and Con-Pochon Council in Whitehorse, Yukon. We acknowledge and are grateful to the original stewards of this land where we get to play, live, and raise our children. You can catch me on the Instagram at the Happy V Project for tips, tools, and anecdotes. And you can also join the weekly-ish newsletter for dispatches from my bedroom and my brain. Also, head to thehappyvaginaproject.com to learn more about how you can work with me. Catch you next time.